Back with you on the Newzroom PM. Thanks for staying on. The Nelson Mandela Children's Fund is hosting a Boy Joy Summit aimed at fighting gender-based violence. The fund says the summit will empower boys between the ages of 13 to 17 to lead the fight against gender-based violence in their communities. Here to tell us more about this campaign is Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, Refilwe Mokwena. Refilwe, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. Numerous organizations in different countries are beginning to include, if you like, young men and boys, particularly at targeted events as either the audience or as participants. Is this just a box-ticking exercise, or are you seeing a significant positive shift in gender norms because of this inclusion?
Hi, Tabo. Thank you so much for having me, and hello to all of your viewers. So I think, as you say, we've realized as a sector, especially the children's sector, others who are interested in development, that if we want to tackle the issue of gender-based violence and so many of our other social ills, we can't only focus on females, girls and women, which has tended to be the trend up until now. So we are seeing more and more programs that are specifically targeting boys and men. Yes, some of them might be, box ticking, but I think there is a real impetus and a genuine concern to say we're in this together. If we want to have a better country, all genders need to be involved. And that's our point of departure as the Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, and are young men showing a strong motivation and willingness to be part of the solution when it comes to prevention and responding to gender-based violence?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we hosted this summit for the first time last year, and we've more than doubled our subscription in terms of the number of boys and men who've shown interest. So just from that alone, we've been able to see that this really is a concern for them. And I think a big part of what they've been saying this morning, this afternoon, is that they don't want to be painted as the problem. As nobody is born a kind of perpetrator of violence, whether gender-based or otherwise. And they really just want to be able to express themselves as boys and eventually as men, and to define masculinity for themselves as well.
Yeah. How well designed are these programs, right? I mean, particularly yourselves. Do we have well-designed programs that can bring significant change to attitudes? Because I tell you, one of the criticisms, or there are a number of them, but one of them maybe we can deal with now, we could talk about the other ones later, is that the programs are ad hoc. One, they are poorly designed, and they are largely attached to events like 16 days of activism.
Yes, no, and those are worthwhile criticisms because, unfortunately, there are initiatives like that. And I think in some ways that's also what happens as a sector, is learning and figuring things out. So the Boy Joy Summit that we're hosting this weekend is not just a once-off event because of the 16 days of activism. Yes, we do specifically choose to do it during this time, but it's actually part of a bigger program which we call Girl Power Meets Boy Joy. And the Girl Power component is one that we've been running for over a year now in 6 provinces of the country, throughout schools in the country. And as much as we call it the Girl Power program, it actually does include a lot of boys, where we run, psychosocial programs in schools, where we do campaigns with the children, where they come up with their own committees. So we really are now building out the focus on boys and men, because there's been more and more demand even within that program, so that it's not just an event, so that we actually then bring these two genders components together in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Maybe the last thing that I'll mention is that when we're targeting the children, even the areas where we work with, we really look for those where the incidence of violence against children is high, so that we're not just targeting randomly, but we're really going for where our programs can help them.
Yeah. And how do you measure your success? I mean, how do you measure something like a redefined identity of men? Right? How, after speaking to them, how do you measure that this has been a successful intervention?
Yes, I think there are quite, tangible ways, established ways, things like what you were saying, measuring knowledge, attitude, practice. Those are things that we do. with ourselves, even with technical assistants, consultants, where there are established methods. But even within a program like this, where it's a 3-day event, we basically take notes in terms of a baseline of how the boys are when they enter the room. Like, for example, we started yesterday evening. What kind of submissions do they make when we ask them these questions? And how does some of that perception start to change? Like, for example, we'd ask them to define what is a boy, and some of what they said were the traditional ways that we say, a boy is somebody who doesn't wear a dress, or a boy is somebody who, is muscular and presents in a certain way. And then when we had a discussion around gender identity, and that actually in today's world, there are a number of genders, genders no longer binary, they also were able to reflect a little bit about, what does it actually mean to be a boy, girl, man, woman. So I think those are some of the things, and even just their own questions where they said, sometimes females can also be masculine, and when they said masculine, they were actually talking about sometimes women can be aggressive, sometimes women can be violent. And what we then had to say was, well, masculinity doesn't necessarily have to be associated with those things. Masculinity is not a negative thing. So I think there's been a real questioning on their part, which already shows some, change in knowledge or at least interest, which we're trying to engage them, not give them answers, but just give them space to begin to tackle these concepts for themselves.
Yeah. There are 3 areas, of course, that also bring about questions. One is the area of scale, the area of impact, and the area of sustainability. Now, of course, being in an organization like the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, you might be in a much more visible platform to be able, I suppose, to attract a degree of resources, a degree of funds to ensure sustainability. But others would say, look, these are, even though you say you would have doubled the number in the room, are small in the sense of not reaching a significant number of young men in particular in the country. How do you respond to that?
Yes, I think, yes, fair enough. This is very much a kind of intensive engagement with a select group of boys. I'd say we have about 54 boys in the room. So somebody might hear that number without context and say, well, that's not very many when you think about how many children there are in the country. But we're careful in terms of, we really want to grow this program in an intentional way. So in some ways, the Boy Joy Summit is a summit for now, but the intention is to make it into a full-blown program in the way that we've been able to fulfill Power, where we have 34,000 children. So it's to say that this is kind of the beginning where we get the conceptualization with the boys in terms of what's important to them, what are the issues that mean something to them. Some of them are actually boys who participated last year and put up their hands to come back. And that's what then informed us building out the full program so that we can actually be in schools, in communities throughout the year, rather than having just an event. And I think that's where you see much more of that scale. And then also in terms of sustainability, as the Children's Fund, we don't believe in doing things on our own. We know that there are many well-experienced organizations out there, and that has actually been our implementation model. It's to find local organizations for us to partner with, and that's been quite good in terms of sustaining the results. So these are things that are yet to come. We're still kind of in the first phase of this program, but it's looking like one that will really have a lot of promise.
Refilwe, Mokwena, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund on that initiative, an intervention particularly to empower young people ages 13 to about 15 to be agents of change in the fight against